I thought for Washington. You all have maybe heard of my husband. He was the first president. You know, he kind of served in the revolution. But what you may not know about George is he would have loved to have been just a plantation owner and a farmer. And he loved to experiment. So I like the fact that you're planting a tree because he experimented with a lot of grafting, different kind of grafting, to see what kind of trees would grow in Virginia. Because not all kinds of trees will grow where we live in Virginia. So he experimented a lot. He would have several different grafted branches onto the trees. He also did a lot of experimental planting of plants. He had Chinese spices, and he planted a lot of different magnolias. But with everything he did, like he did with everything else, he kept meticulous records. George was good at keeping very, very meticulous life records. He put stakes beside everything he planted to tell you what it was. And he had those records. And he was also into this new thing called rotating crops. Up until a few years ago in Virginia, all they planted was tobacco because that's what we were famous for. But but George found out that was destroying the land. So now he rotates between tobacco, corn, wheat, and a few other crops. And he's also experimenting with a thing called fertilizer to kind of help the ground recuperate from the damage that all the years of just growing tobacco has done to the land. So he would be so excited to see you plant trees today because George is big into trees. He is big into plants. He's big into having a heritage that all of us can remember and all of us can be proud of. So thank you for having us here.
Following the boss's wife is going to be pretty incredible. I've not done this before. My name is Michael Gunn. I'm dressed as a third continental light dragoon. The dragoons were something that was created by George Washington. And I'm honored to be here today for a couple of different perspectives. Let me start off by saying that the tree you have down here is basically something that can actually be traced back to the very beginnings of Boston, when the British had been taking over the city and running things. And the people at the time were duplicitous. They weren't sure whether they want to have a revolution or not. In fact, probably only about a third of the people even want to say the word revolution. The other 2/3 weren't ready for that yet. So they gathered at a place in downtown Boston at the time, which had an enormous tree, an enormous elm tree. And they gathered around this elm tree because that elm tree had been there for a lot of years. And back at that time, the sentiments of people were to kind of gather around trees. There was a pine tree further north and such, but the elm tree was there. The British found out that people were gathering at that point to basically come together and discuss what was going on between the British and this country and them. Basically requiring the people to put them up in their homes, feed them at their cost and spread stuff. So the British in retaliation burned the elm tree. If they could have done anything worse, I can't imagine what that was, because burning that elm tree then created an enormous movement around all of the colonies. Instead of about a third people wanting a revolution, that popped all the way up to something more than 2/3 people who are now into a revolution. It's an honor today to be here when you basically decided to exist, taking that thing that was done at the time where community people gathered around a tree. Now, after the Dutch elm disease, it's kind of hard to find elm trees anymore. There are some hybrids, but this is a much better idea because it'll serve very, very well here. So people, when they come here, you're going to have a beautiful view of a river. It's a very nice place to kind of like lay back and just look at nature and such. But the other thing that I'm hoping happens at the time is that you might continue with these concepts of gathering around a place where you have a tree to basically discuss sentiments. No matter what side of anything that you're on, it would be a thing to do. I believe that sentiment exists here because Clermont County is basically this river right here draws a line. And when you go east of here, that was something that was called the military district after the Revolutionary War. My bosses basically donated at the time, George Washington donated 27,000 acres, of which he had been paid. He was a surveyor. He got paid 1/3 of the land he surveyed. He donated 27,000 acres between here going toward Chillicothe. The United States added on that to make a military district going further east. So there was a lot of people who came here because that land was given to Revolutionary War participants for their participation in the Revolutionary War. So that sentiment still exists. That sentiment exists here. You can see it. That sentiment existed after the Revolutionary War and into the Civil War in 1812. That a lot of people who are highly patriotic come from this particular area. A lot more like when you go west of here. Patriotism kind of like goes downhill when you start heading west. But it exists very, very heavily here. So again, I'm a member of the Sons of the American Revolution, Cincinnati Chapter, and I'm honored today to be here to enable you to find out something about the little history about the Liberty trees or the history trees. It's a good idea. It's something that went back to the very, very foundings of this country. And I think we should be applauded for what you've done here and the manner in which you've done it. I can't think of it being any better position. This is a great place to be, and I'm sure this will expand out within your community. Thank you for having me.